And this preserve is one, as Olivia said, of 6 that the Land Trust owns, and it was acquired over a period of time. The story behind this is quite interesting. This is one of the few remaining salt marshes in the area. Those of you who came here probably went by what used to be salt marshes in the past. The whole East Shore Park used to be a salt marsh. The port area used to be a salt marsh. The airport used to be a salt marsh. And all of these things have been filled in. So that makes this particularly special because it's one of the few remaining salt marshes that we have around. And salt marshes provide a variety of functions, which I'll get into later. So this was actually a development back in 1917. Some developer bought up this land and broke it into parcels, 40 plus parcels. And if you look at a map, you can actually see there's a road right down the center of this. Fortunately, they never built it, but there is a paper road on the maps. And all of the 40 parcels were sold in the late teens to people who envisioned building summer recreational sites down here. Then a couple things happened. One was the Great Depression, and then we had the war, and then we had the advent of a lot of environmental regulations. So nothing happened. Nobody ever built anything. However, these were all individually owned, and the city was rendering tax bills to these folks every year. And many of them came to realize that this had no value to them, economic value to them. It was pretty and they enjoyed it, but they didn't derive any benefits from it. And so what they did was they stopped paying the taxes. And then after a period of time, the city foreclosed on them. And so the city came to own a number of these. And the alder person for this area was approached by the Land Trust back at about 10-15 years ago and asked if she would facilitate the transfer of those parcels of land to the Land Trust so that this could become a preserve protected indefinitely for the future. And Arlene DePino did that. And so what she did was she arranged for parcels, the individual parcels, to be transferred to the Land Trust at $1 a piece. And so every couple of years, the city forecloses, puts the stuff together, and then sells it to the Land Trust. It hasn't happened for a few years, but as we stand right now, about half of this is owned by the city, and most of the other half is owned by the Land Trust. There is one parcel out there that is owned, that somebody's paying taxes on, but it's for the most part preserved. It's protected. This is protected indefinitely, and at some point in the future it might actually be part of the route for the Shoreline Greenway Trail, but that's and the Shoreline Greenway Trail is a path that's discussed and envisioned that will go from Hammonasset to Lighthouse here. But
so they'd build a boardwalk through there?
Yes, they would. Yep. And the boardwalks meet very, very strict environmental standards. They've gotten a couple of them built on the trail in different locations. The Department of Environmental Protection correctly gets very involved in the whole process. So that's the story of this preserve, which makes it kind of special because it is a piece of salt marsh that's left. Okay, so let's talk about salt marshes. So salt marshes are coastal wetlands, and the NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, defines it as coastal wetland flooded and drained by salt water from tides. So, and it's important because it serves as a nursery, it serves as a filter, it serves as a sponge, and it serves as a source of nutrients. And this ecosystem, this type of ecosystem, salt marshes, are amongst the most productive in terms of producing energy of any in the world. They rival rainforests in terms of their productivity. So they really, really are very, very special, and they're deserving of preservation. Now, they're characterized, and it's a really, really tough environment in which to live because it's characterized by lots of stuff decomposing. It's characterized by heat from the sun, salt from the water, and very low oxygen levels. And there's not a lot of things that like to grow in that environment. But there are some, and we're looking at some of them. So amongst the challenges here is the salt levels vary tremendously over the course of the day. The salt percentage, the percent of salt in salt water is about 3.5%. In Long Island Sound, it's between 2 and 3%. The difference being that Long Island Sound is fed by many freshwater rivers, which tends to dilute the stuff. The range of salt concentration in this area here is between 1%, which is very, very low, and 10%, which is off the charts crazy. Now, how does it get to 10%? It gets to 10% because the water comes in here, the sun beats down, the water goes out, the tides are low, the water concentrates, it evaporates, and the salt levels get very, very high in certain concentrated areas here. So what you have is a unique set of plants that are adapted, and ultimately animals that are adapted to live in that kind of changing environment. And again, that's one of the reasons why these things are so important. Okay, so what do we have here? What you can see are a bunch of grasses, and the most common are the light green ones here, and those are cordgrass, and there's a couple of different kinds of cordgrass here. The common cordgrass are the ones right in front of us that get the water. Now, just to put this in perspective, high tide today was about 5 o'clock. So what we're seeing today is the tide is going out, but it's substantially high. So there's a lot of salt water in here right now. As you move, and the nature of the different types of life in here become a function of how close are they to the salt water. And the ones that are the most tolerant, like the cordgrasses, are right here. And then as you move back further, you get more variety. And these things, which are called common reeds, or more commonly Phragmites, people know them as such, are generally regarded as invasive. Although there is a native variety of these, it's been supplanted by the non-native variety. And they will grow very, very rapidly in disturbed soils. And what you see is lots of disturbed soils around here, because they've really, really taken over. In these areas, there's not a lot of salt, and that's why they do so well. In fact, the Land Trust was involved in a project at Long Wharf where there was a lot of Phragmites, and the way they got rid of the Phragmites was by bringing salt water into the areas in which they were growing, and that will get rid of them. But there's a bunch of people who say, you know, we have these things established, there's ecosystems that have grown up around them, and they work, so we should not mess with them too much. So what do we have out here? We have the grasses, and they, again, grade out as we go up higher. There's what's called blackgrass, which is really a rush. There's spike grasses, and then there's more Phragmites on that high area over there. What they do is they don't provide food for too many animals. In fact, there's very few that eat it. Green crabs, I think, are one of the few that actually eat the grass. Mostly what they do is they produce energy, and they die. And they die and they decompose. And when they decompose, it becomes food for lots of microorganisms. And what you have is a kind of continuing food chain here where the little things die and then bigger things come in and get them. A couple of other interesting aspects of this, a very common set of animals that occur here are ribbed mussels and fiddler crabs. And scientific experiments have been done to demonstrate that there's a real correlation between the success of all of this together. So areas which have fiddler crabs and which have ribbed mussels produce more grass, because what they do is they aerate the soil, and it allows that to grow better. And obviously the fiddler crabs and the ribbed mussels do better where they are too. So it's an interesting ecosystem here. Unfortunately, we're not seeing a lot of wildlife here. See, in addition to the grasses and the small microorganisms, there's a lot of crustaceans typically in here, again, tidal in nature. Some fish, mummichogs, some eels, minnows, they all are out there. And they constitute the food base for the birds and the bigger fish and some of the crabs. And also, this place supports mammals. So you have obviously the raccoons and the possums, but you talk to the neighbors, they will tell you there's a good number of foxes and coyotes down here too. So this is really an ecosystem that covers the whole range of plants and animals. Let's see. Okay, so it's a wonderful ecosystem that's self-supporting, self-sustaining. It also provides a whole bunch of benefits to humans. One of which, obviously, is that it protects us in storms. And interesting story, the Quinnipiac Meadows Preserve, which is largely a salt marsh. One of our volunteers, Stuart Hutchings, lives across from that. And he tells stories about when hurricanes came in, specifically Superstorm Sandy. You could watch the river rising as the storm was coming in, and the marsh just absorbed all of it, and it had there was minimal damage in the whole Front Street area because the marsh just absorbed all that stuff. So it's a great sponge. It captures all the fertilizer we put on our lawn that we shouldn't, runs off. A lot of it's captured here. Heavy metals can be captured here and embedded in the peat, which is underground. And as global warming comes and the sea rises, this will be, again, a buffer that will protect us. So it's just an invaluable source, a purifier. It purifies lots of the water coming down the river, and it's an ecosystem worthy of preservation. So that's kind of a quick overview. Any questions people have?